It's day 7 of YT History Month, and today we're talking about one of the greatest wealth transfers in American history, the Homestead Act of 1862. First, let's be clear. The land that was given away wasn't America's to give. It was indigenous land taken by force and then handed out almost exclusively to white Americans and European immigrants. Over 270 million acres, nearly 10% of the entire United States, were distributed through this program, forming the foundation of generational white wealth that persists to this day. At the same time, freed black people who had actually worked this land for generations were denied their piece of the so-called American dream. In fact, you've probably heard about 40 acres and a mule, a promise made in 1865 in writing by General Sherman that should have allowed formerly enslaved black people to build independent lives. But within months, that land was stolen right back. In many cases, literally, as gifted lands that had already been settled by freed slaves were stolen. President Andrew Johnson, an open white supremacist, rescinded the order, returning land to the same Confederate planters who had just lost the war. Instead of land ownership, freed people were pushed into sharecropping, a system designed to keep them in perpetual debt and dependence, or slavery by another name. And if you're wondering whether black Americans were allowed to participate in the Homestead Act, technically, yes, but in reality, no. The few freed people who did manage to claim land were often terrorized and forced out by white mobs. And let's not forget, while indigenous land was being stolen, indigenous people themselves were explicitly excluded from homesteading. They were displaced, forced onto reservations, and stripped of their own legal claims to land, while white families were handed their resources for free. Now let's talk about white women, because this is where it gets a little complicated. Under coverture laws, which are still a thing today, married women were legally considered extensions of their husbands. The Homestead Act was one of the first cracks in that system, allowing unmarried women to claim land. Sounds progressive, right? But let's not get it twisted. This wasn't about women's rights. It was about expanding white control across the West by any means necessary. And these systems of exclusion didn't just disappear. Of course, again, they evolved. Just look at Trump-era voting laws, where states like Georgia have tried to require licenses that match birth certificates, which means married women who change their names are suddenly finding themselves unable to vote. It's a feature, not a bug. They absolutely know what they're doing. And this is just how whiteness works. It's not just about what happened in the past, it's about how that past still shapes who gets access, who gets excluded, and who gets punished. And like Trump says,
we are just getting started.